Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Gabby Reece Show. On this show, we discuss the complex topics around relationships, health, fitness, family, business, and so much more with the world's leading experts. My goal is to simplify these topics and give you practical takeaways that you can start using in your life today. We all know that living a healthy, balanced life can be challenging. So let's try managing life a little better and have some fun along the way. Because after all, life is just one big experiment. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the show. My guest today is Watkins. Light is a meditation expert, specialist, and also an author. He's written books like Pure Bliss, and his latest book is out called Light Walker. And this is really a fascinating story because in 2018, long and deep into his journey in meditation and public speaking and teaching yoga, Light was sort of having this voice say, hey, you got to pack all your stuff up and do what's called spiritual minimalism. And it wasn't about like getting rid of all your stuff or being opposed to having stuff, but it's just to be free of it. And so he went through the process of downsizing his life to the point that he basically, since 2018, has been living out of his backpack. And he'll live in Mexico City and rent Airbnbs or travel to Europe. And he says, listen, I'm not opposed to nice things, and this isn't forever. But what he does do is document what he's gone through, so many of the lessons that he's learned, and he shares that in The Light Walker. One of the other things I really love that we talked about was he only shares the sweet truth. And I know for me, I sort of relate the truth as like being very direct or harsh. And he really brings up the idea of we can be very truthful and really honor ourselves, but we can still do that in a gentle and kind way.
Oh, I'm looking
Look at it, right?
Look at where is this picture?
That's
Hawaii.
Yeah, Kauai, the river.
Beautiful.
That's right in front of my house. I was married on that river.
Really nice.
Floating. You could always have a digital file like you do.
Such a life you created for yourself, huh? Do you ever like take that in, like just with all the photos and?
You know what's interesting? Maybe this is a launching point because we're going to get into the importance of gratitude. Mm-hmm. And people are like, I'm so grateful. And for me, I always think I'm going to show how grateful I am by kind of not only taking care of the things that I've been allowed to experience, like, so the relationships, it's even like a marriage. The biggest way I can say I'm grateful is to try to show up every day. Mm-hmm. And I think it's more about that for me. Mm. These are just, these moments are gone already, mm-hmm. in a way. Mm-hmm. I don't really attach to that, mm-hmm. but it's, it's like it's a fun, like, oh yeah, that's nice. Mm. But I don't attach to this stuff. Mm-hmm. It's like volleyball. It's like, okay, that's long gone. I don't know. I'm sure you are really understanding that based on how you're living.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of the essence of the whole thing, is that sentient moments are happening all around.
Yeah.
So it's not that we discount these, but we just get present to what's happening now. Yeah. And as we're building new memories.
I mean, talk to me, like if I see a ladybug outside, I'm excited. Uh-huh. It sounds silly. And I'm not a person who's like, oh, look at the ladybug. But inside, I'm very aware of like, oh, there's hummingbirds over in that bush right now, mm-hmm. and they're extraordinary. Or, I mean, I think we all do it differently. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Not, it doesn't always have to be so monumental and I stop and do like a dance.
I think that's the good stuff. That's what, people say life gets faster as you get older. I think that's what slows it down, is that presence. And that's probably one of our most important assets, honestly, because you can have all the time in the world, but if you're not present for that time, then you're essentially squandering the time. Yeah. Or you're diminishing it at the very least.
This is not an argument. This is a contentious point for my husband and I, because he's better at that than I am. And
presence.
And sort of like, what are we doing? Mm-hmm. And I'm more of a list, task, get it, sort of done, answer emails, that person. And in my mind, I'm like, he's right. And I still feel like it has to get done. And he's like, is this what we're doing with our lives? And it's such a big, straight question. And I know he's right. And then so I think, when I read your latest book, I thought about that because I want to get into that, how there's so many ideas that we all agree upon. Like we agree with you. I agree with you. Or agree with some of these philosophies of having less and more experiential. I think a lot of us don't know how to get there, or we feel locked in, or now we have responsibilities, whatever that means, that we create. And so I was really fascinated to kind of figure out from you, because you're like almost you're the extreme. I call people like you a concentrated tablet to put in the water so that we all get the hue, right?
I like that.
I started, Paul Chek was my first person. Do you know who that is? So I was like, 25 years ago, I was like, oh, Paul's the concentrated tablet for all of us just to get a fighting chance to get a little, a few of his ideas. But where do you think collectively we're not seeing more of the freedom that we actually have?
Well, I think it's not, you can't expect it to be, and when I say you, I mean speaking generally, you can't expect it to be an intellectual exercise where you can kind of force yourself to see it. It's really a matter of, you've done those magic eye puzzles. Remember the magic eye puzzles where you have the pattern, it looks just like wallpaper or something, and you stare at it, and then long enough time goes by, and then eventually, without trying to see anything, an image just appears, and you have no idea what the image is until it appears. So you can't go in with an expectation that you're going to see a car, because it could be a pyramid, or it could be a tree, or it could be anything, right? But the way you can position yourself mentally to be able to experience it is by surrendering, just completely softening and surrendering, and putting yourself into a place where you're not necessarily trying to see anything. And then that's when it appears. And that's what presence means. You can't go around going, be present, be present. Oh, I'm trying to get present. It has to become something that you cultivate, and it takes time to do this, just like strength training. It takes time. You can understand how to do a pull-up, but it's a very different experience to actually reach up there, grab the bar, and pull yourself up. But there are other exercises that you can do to build the strength over time to be able to do that first pull-up. And then once you do that first pull-up, you can't not do a pull-up. If you're in that position, you can do it. You don't have to think about it. Yeah. You don't have to will yourself to do it. It's just that you do it or you don't do it type of a thing. And I feel like presence is the same way. It needs to be, and we want to understand it in that same way as well. So I have a story to share about that if we have time.
This is about you.
Okay. So I was in Gracias Madre one day. That vegan place down on
the name alone
Melrose.
Would make me just say no, unless I was somewhere else.
I would say no. Okay.
I'm kidding.
No, I used to be a big vegan in those days. I'm not anymore. But
okay.
Anyways, that's aside from the point.
Yeah.
I was in there in between appointments in West Hollywood one day, and I just wanted to go and get a little snack while I was trying to figure out how to respond to this email that I got. It was a business email about money, which is like a really challenging thing for me to kind of navigate, because someone was like saying, oh, you didn't perform what I was expecting and blah, blah, blah. So I'm trying to work out whether I should just give them their money back or stand my ground or say, you didn't do what you said. All these kinds of thoughts were swirling around in my head. And meanwhile, I'm at the table just like this, and I'm the only one. It's like me and 3 other people in the whole restaurant. And the waiter comes over, introduces himself, and I have my laptop on the table. I have my paperwork spread out just like that. And I'm trying to work out this, what am I going to do about this situation? And then after I ordered my little snack, I didn't really, I thought the waiter was going to go on, but he's just standing there and he's not saying anything. And eventually I look up at him and he's staring at me and he goes, can I ask you a question? So now I'm like in my head around this, like, well, what does he want to know? Like, well, I gave you my order. What do you want? He goes, what do you do for a living? And now I'm really like, oh my God, this is like some LA shit where he thinks I'm somebody, and I'm so tired of people thinking I'm a basketball player,
Yeah.
And then finally I don't say anything the whole time. I'm in my head, I'm screaming, right? And finally he goes, I'm just asking because you seem so happy. And I was just wondering what you did that made you so happy. And I was like, wow. Because what was interesting is that I didn't feel happy at all. But, you know, I guess from all this meditation and all this sort of intentional work on being present and blah, 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 it starts to stabilize after a while and people can feel it. People can feel it.
Yeah.
And I think that's where it needs to get in order for us to just live our lives normally. Like, for instance, Robert Persick, the guy who wrote Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, he says the way you paint a perfect picture is you just make yourself perfect and you paint naturally. And what he was saying is that, you know, if you want to have more fulfillment in your life, or if you want to have more peace or more Zen, you have to cultivate that and you just be natural, just be yourself, and people can feel that on you.
Yeah. I think it's a really interesting, not just practice, but the faith of, you know, Laird and I talk about so many things are in certain ways formulaic, right? And it's weird, like once we start to understand it, so it's the curiosity, which you're big on, and then it's exploration, and then consistency and all these things. It's like wherever we sort of put these small little things that we can do, you do build something, whatever, you know, is important enough for you to build. And it can sustain you even when you think, what kind of email am I sending back to this guy or whatever? And it's hard to, even when you know it, and maybe you don't go through this anymore, I don't know, I'd be curious. It's hard when you're starting again at something. You go, oh, I don't know if this is going to work. And it's like, no, just every day, you know, a little bit, try it, you know, ask questions. And I want to talk about meditation, because the thing that I really respond to when you talk about meditation is that the way it got to you and you learned it and it sort of worked for you was in this less rules kind of way. So let's start there, because I think it's like eating well, moving consistently. The more we can get it close to a version of who we are, that's when I believe we have a much deeper and consistent practice, because it does reflect us. And when you talk about that, because I think people think, oh, you're supposed to sit a certain way, you're supposed to do it a certain way. And what you came out and said was actually quite different.
Yeah, and to your earlier point, I do go through it. I'm always in my head around, you know, do I want to start over? Do I have what it takes? I have imposter syndrome all the time.
Well, and it's hard because you're supposed to be like, oh, you're the calm guy, you're the Zen guy, you're the happiness guy, whatever, you know, happiness I think floats in and out of us, maybe the peaceful guy. And then do you ever just think, oh man, not only am I known for that, now my business is around that? Like,
well, here's the thing. As I've gotten older, and I'm sure you've had this experience too, you realize everybody has imposter syndrome.
Yeah, they do.
We all have it. We're all going through the same thing.
We do.
And I just posted something the other day. I said, if anyone who's living life on the edge, whatever that edge is for them, has imposter syndrome. And if you don't feel imposter syndrome, you may want to go a little further, right? Because that just probably means you're in your comfort zone, you're mailing it in. And we want to be doing things. That's how we grow. That's how we evolve. That's how we get that pull up. You have to stretch yourself. You have to put yourself in those positions and in those places to do the things that you don't ultimately want to do. Like, I don't like doing ice baths, but the last time I did an ice bath was here at your house, and I wouldn't have done it had everyone else not been doing it. All right. It's the whole adage is if you hang out at the barbershop long enough, you're going to get a haircut.
Yeah, for sure.
So even if you don't want to do these kinds of things, if you can somehow put yourself in proximity to people and other places where these things are happening, then you'll find yourself meditating, you know, doing things more mindfully and etc. Because again, you can't just rely on it to be an intellectual exercise. Now,
but the world is really, it's a tough one.
Yeah.
And it seems to be getting tougher.
And it's not going to change anytime soon.
No, it isn't.
So one of the reasons why we experience suffering is because we have an expectation that one day we're going to wake up and it's going to change. And that hasn't been my experience. It just keeps getting, harder and harder, because then you're kind of in this race against time after a while. Like, for instance, when you have kids, you want to hurry up and enjoy as much of them as possible before they leave the house, because you know what it's like when a child leaves the house, because you left the house at one point, and then you're only seeing your parents on holidays, on vacations and birthdays and things like that. And so that time is very precious, but the more you try to force it, the less they want to hang out with you.
Yeah.
Right. So there's that interesting balance that we're all trying to find. And my hypothesis is that if you can turn everything into a little bit of a meditation, then you end up creating more of the experiences you ultimately want to have in life. So in that sense, meditation can become a foundational practice for washing clothes, going through your to-do list, doing all the things that you normally have to do. It's not about either I do these things or I do something that looks like I'm optimizing my time. It's got to be, I think it's got to be a little bit of both. And if you start to see it more as a process, as opposed to I have to get to the end of this, or I have to take advantage of this, or I have to make sure that I'm optimizing this. If you just kind of see it as, okay, this is a part of it. This is a part of it. Whether you're feeling great, whether you're feeling not so great, maybe you're sick and you're healing, you're going through the healing process, and that's a part of it. And you can't rush that. And, maybe you're taking care of somebody and you want them to act in a certain way or be appreciative in a certain way that they're not being. That's a part of it. And so it's all the ice bath. It's all variations of the ice bath. You're learning something and you're strengthening something, and you're going to be able to then use that in the field where it really counts the most. Because it's ultimately not about being in the ice bath. The ice bath is the preparation for showing up in life.
Yeah, it's the moment in the parking lot or with a loved one, or someone tells you something that you don't want to hear, but might be truthful, and how do you want to react to that? And so before we move into kind of this chapter that you're in right now in your life, I really would love to go over kind of some just basics, because I do really appreciate your approach to meditation. And I think for kind of householder people, it's very compelling because it seems really achievable. And so first of all, why did it take that teaching to get you to go, oh, okay, this is for me? What and why were you even sniffing around this area? What was going on in your life that you thought I'm drawn to this idea of meditation?
That's a great question. I don't think anybody's ever asked me that question.
Really?
No.
I mean, I would imagine you're a long way from where you started.
Yeah. Well, I'll give you the short story of the brief sketch of my history. So I grew up in Alabama, and as we may hypothesize, there are more snowstorms and meditators in places like Alabama, which is in the southern part of the United States, cradle of the Confederacy. They banned Ellen, back when she first started her show because it was too much. So there wasn't a lot of meditation happening down there. There was a lot of church happening. And I went to church quite a bit because my mom, I wouldn't describe her as a religious person. She felt that growing up in the church would be good for her kids. So we were there every Sunday. In fact, that was the toll you had to pay to be able to go outside and play after work. So I'd be sitting in church completely bored out of my mind. None of it made a lot of sense. I was like detecting holes in the logic coming and going. And so by the time I got out of Alabama and out of my parents' house, I didn't want to have anything to do with church. But I noticed that there was still this kind of innate curiosity around, what is life about? Are there aliens? why do certain people have great experiences and other people have very challenging experiences, and all these kinds of questions. And I didn't have any good answers. I thought I was the only one with these kinds of questions. And then I read the book Conversations with God when I was living in New York City, modeling. And that was what I consider to be my gateway book into spirituality, because it's a book full of answers. And so then I started getting into yoga, and then through yoga, I was introduced to meditation through some of my yoga teachers. And this is back in the mid-90s. And then I moved from I moved from New York to Los Angeles.
Going deeper into the
Yeah, I wanted to go
zone.
to the heart of the spiritual scene in America. And I was a vegan at the time, and this was where all the vegan stuff was happening as well. And so, yeah, I came out here and I just started going all in. I was going to Agape. I was going to the Self-Realization Fellowship. I was reading Autobiography of a Yogi. I was regularly at the Bodhi Tree bookstore on Melrose, and then at Elixir across the street with a little Japanese tea garden. You remember that place? And yeah, so anything, I was in channeling classes in Van Nuys. I was doing astral traveling. I was doing all of it. I just couldn't get enough of it. And it's funny because when I met my meditation teacher in 2003, I had this inner confirmation that I was meant to become a meditation teacher. But I didn't know how it was going to happen. I just knew that this guy I really connected with, and he was the one that basically introduced me to what I now realize is the minimalist approach to meditation, the householder style of meditation, and gave me sort of language for that. And then I understood why in those previous years when I had been trying to force myself to meditate, because that's what was in all the spiritual books, it never felt like they described. There was no samadhi, there was no bliss, there was no nirvana. It was just me sitting there staring at the back of my eyelids, waiting in pain for the time to be finished. That's all meditation felt like 99.9% of the time.
How long did you endure that way?
Well, I would dabble. I consider myself to be a dabbler, so I didn't do it consistently. But, I hung out in those scenes where people were, quotes, meditating. And so inevitably, I'd have to meditate with them. And but anyway, after I met my teacher, first thing he said was, get off the floor, because that's where I went to start meditating. Get off the floor, go sit on the couch. And then I would sit on the couch with my back straight, a foot from the back of the couch. He goes, okay, now slide back and just relax like you're watching TV. And then I would bring my fingers together like this. He goes, just relax relax. You just need to relax physically. And what I realized was just by that one little instruction, just relaxing, it positioned my mind to have a more settled experience. And then, of course, I'm in there and I'm envisioning the white light and the waterfall and focusing on this and concentrating on that and deepening my breathing. He goes, you're doing way too much. I could see your brows are crinkled. You're using lots and lots of mental effort now. Now I want you to relax your mind and stop focusing. And in fact, take the anti-focus approach. And so anyway, during that process, I hit my first experience of bliss.
In that experience?
In that experience. And when you go there for the first time, it's unlike what you're expecting, because you're expecting to be there thinking to yourself, oh, wow, I'm experiencing bliss. But that's not what it feels like. What it feels like is you have a time lapse where you're in it without realizing you're in it. And then 20 minutes goes by and you kind of jolt out of it and you look at the clock and it felt like 2 minutes, but it was actually 20 minutes. And there was an unaccounted for 18 minutes where you don't remember thinking about anything. You don't remember sleeping. You're still in the same position. So you can infer that you were in this other state. And I started having that on a regular basis. And then meditation became like a really beautiful, delightful, I'm going to use this word, drug that I couldn't get enough of. And I became, instead of being the person who couldn't wait for the time to finish, I became the person going, just 5 more minutes, just 10 more minutes. And I'd be sitting there for 40 minutes, 50 minutes, an hour. And it was beautiful. It was beautiful. And then I just wanted to show other people how to do it because I know what it's like to struggle in meditation.
I know that you said he gave you some language. I'm interested in how you developed your teaching style, because I'm always interested how people get their teaching style, and also you communicate on multiple platforms. So you'll do a class, but then you'll do speaking engagements. So first of all, the courage to guide, to teach, to share, and then how do you develop your style and trust that? Because that's hard for a lot of people to do.
That's a great question. That's a really great question. And I firmly believe that people are not natural teachers. Most people can't teach their way out of a paper bag. And a really easy way to tell this is to ask someone for directions. You know, especially someone who's lived in an area for a long time. If you ask them for directions, they'll say, yeah, it's just down the street. And you go, what's the street's name? You know, it's just the one with the mailbox. Their mailbox is all up and down the street. Yeah, but, you know, there's that red mailbox. Well, there's 4 red mailboxes. You know, it's like they know how to do it themselves. Yeah. But it's really challenging to take someone from A to Z and articulate that. And so I realized that I was actually a gifted teacher when I was teaching yoga when I first moved to Los Angeles. And it's interesting because the way that I became a better teacher is that I was very insecure about my ability to do yoga. I couldn't touch my toes at all. Not barely, I couldn't touch my toes. If I did a forward fold back in those days, I'd be about 10 inches from the floor. So that was kind of like my little secret that I didn't tell anybody when I took my yoga teacher training, because I thought that that's what needed to happen in order for you to be a proper yoga teacher. You had to be flexible, you had to be bendy, you had to be able to demonstrate the poses. And I couldn't demonstrate the poses.
Yeah, what'd you do? You get a student who you knew was good at something?
I learned how to articulate. And in order to articulate people through the poses properly, you have to take them from A to Z. You can't assume that they know anything. And so I practiced that thousands of times, you know, in my classes. And, you know, you can see in real time whether people are able to understand it or not based on what their bodies are doing. Yeah. So that became my unique advantage. And then I was able to borrow from that to help people with meditation. But then another experience that really helped me was I went to Israel, and I did a tour through Israel. And we had this tour guide that was like the most amazing tour guide I've ever had in my entire life. His name is Michael Bauer, if you want to look him up. And what made him so amazing is that he incorporated and integrated storytelling into all of the things that he was showing us. But he would never tell us the reasons why anything was the way it was. He would set us up to figure it out for ourselves. And he would base it on things we had seen in the past. So you could tell he'd done this 1,000 times, obviously. But he would show us a site, and like, for instance, he would show us Masada, which is the mountain where there was this big attack with the Roman army against the Hebrews. And you could see like they had some kind of trenches to get the water up at the top, but the army wanted to close off their supply lines, and there was this epic battle that was waged. And so he would ask us questions about that. How do you guys think they made it up there? How do you think they fought them off? And so you really had to like get immersed into the whole story. And I was like, wow, this is so interesting. As a teacher, I'm listening to this and I'm thinking to myself, I'm so engaged right now that, you know, I want to know the answers to these questions. I want to figure it out. So I started doing more of that.
Wait, how do you do that in a
meditation class?
Yeah, like what's a cue? Like
you say things like, okay, you guys are having a very difficult time meditating. Why is that the case? And people will say stuff like, oh, my mind is so busy. I have monkey mind, right? Okay. So you define monkey mind for people who've never heard that term before. And then you would say something to the effect of, well, research says that the mind is busy like that because it's looking for something very specific. What do you imagine your mind is looking for? Like, forget about meditation. What is your mind looking for just in life in general? And people will say peace. People will say control. People will say, satisfaction. And I say, extrapolate that a little further.
Right.
And eventually we arrive at happiness, right? Mm-hmm. We want control because we feel like control makes us happy. We want to understand things because we feel like that makes us happy. So then we define happiness. So we just go through this whole process. And then eventually they basically teach themselves how their mind works because I use their language.
Right. How are they going to understand? What are the words they hear?
So, and then I'll say, now remember Sarah said da 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 da. And so she was absolutely right. And everyone wants to be called right.
Yeah.
So now I have Sarah's full attention.
Yeah. She's like,
yeah. But I'll do that with everybody in the class, with somebody. And it's a really beautiful way to keep people engaged.
Is there an energy when you're teaching a class where you have a particular class where you almost have like a, 2 or 3 kind of busy minds, and they can energetically just put the whole rest of the class on tilt that other people can't go? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
like the energy, does it spread where you
Yeah.
just go, oh, I got these 3 over here, and they're going to the whole rest of the class gets, do you have experiences like that where you're trying to, because I know that from teaching where I'm trying to create the same experience for everyone, but they're all so different.
Yeah. You don't want somebody hijacking
Correct.
the class, what their experience is.
Yeah. And I would imagine with meditation, it's, it's so subtle, which makes it even easier to hijack.
But see, that is one of the misconceptions.
Okay.
Is that it's this subtle thing, it's ephemeral, it's mercurial, and this state keeps eluding me. That's not what's happening at all.
Says the pro. Let's hear it.
I equate, say as someone who struggled a lot, and I'll give you another experience that I struggled with until I was 32 years old that you'll appreciate, which is I didn't know how to swim until I decided to take swimming lessons at 32 years old, right? So as someone who didn't know, I could tread water, but if I had to swim from one side of your pool to the other side, I wouldn't be able to do it without my life flashing before my eyes, at least a couple of times, and being completely winded and out of breath. And so that's how a lot of people experience meditation. And this whole thing of monkey mind is really not about their mind. It's not a accurate assessment of their mind. It's an assessment of the fact that they don't know the mechanics of how to move through their thoughts. It'd be like me saying I have monkey arms and monkey legs because I couldn't make it to the other side of your pool. I don't have monkey arms or monkey legs. I just haven't learned the mechanics. Once you teach somebody the mechanics, they don't even have to want to go to the other side of the pool. They just have to start applying those mechanics, and they'll start moving from one side to the other side. So I try to get them to understand that it's not a personal thing. It's not about you. It's not about your history. It's not about your zodiac sign. It's not about, any of that stuff that we try to make it about. It's really just about understanding the mechanics. And in order to teach the mechanics, you can't teach the mechanics in the pool because the teacher wants to see you elongate your body. They want to see you move your arms. They want to see how you kick and all that outside of the pool first. Then they put you in the pool and they start giving you drills to help you embody those mechanics. And the same thing is true with meditation. We spend a lot of time talking about those mechanics before we even sit down to meditate. And then the meditation part at the end is really just, okay, now employ those mechanics, and people start moving away from their surface mind, their busy monkey mind, into that settled state, but without realizing that that's what's happening. So I've seen that thousands of times. Yeah. And so it's not, when people say, oh, my mind is this, it's just like, okay, fine. You just don't understand the mechanics. That's all that means. It means nothing more, nothing less.
When you say it like that, there's something very inviting about wanting to learn the mechanics, because that seems like a step by step.
People don't even realize there are mechanics.
I know that nobody thinks that about meditation. It just thinks like you're going to sit down and all of a sudden you're going to hit by a white light and like game on.
Yeah, which is like getting on a surfboard and just thinking that's all you need to do to start surfing. It's like, no, you have to learn how to. You have to, first of all, have the right wetsuit. You have to learn how to carry it into the water or it's going to smack you in the face. Yeah. You have to know how to hop up. You have to know where to stand on the board. You have to know how to recognize a wave. There's like a million things you want to learn before you go in there, or your experience is going to be horrible.
Yeah.
And so when people say I had a horrible meditation experience, it's probably because they didn't know the mechanics.
So just on the basics, I mean, position, you talked about position.
Mm-hmm.
What are basics? So when people hear the word mechanics, they have a sense of what you mean.
So when you're navigating your mind, the tendency is to want to control the mind. And there's this wonderful anecdote that I told in Bliss More,
Mm-hmm.
which is my book on meditation, How to Meditate. The subtitle is actually How to Succeed in Meditation Without Really Trying, which is exactly what you're learning how to do. I use this anecdote of the white polar bear study, which had nothing to do with meditation. Do you know the study?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So the white polar bear study was conducted by this Harvard psychologist who wanted to see if it's possible to suppress your mind, to stop thoughts that you didn't want to have, which is what a lot of people try to do when they sit down to meditate. And the way he tested this was he had a room full of students. Everybody had a table in front of them, and they had a bell on top of the table with a silent ring, and they were instructed to put their index fingers on top of the bell. And he said, for 5 minutes, I want you all just to think about one thought, and that thought is white polar bears. So every time you are thinking of this white polar bear thought, I want you to tap the silent button, and we're recording how many times each person is tapping the button. If you start to wander away and have unrelated thoughts, then you don't tap the button. But once you start to remember, oh, I'm supposed to be thinking about white polar bears, start tapping the button again. So don't try to force anything, just be natural. And we're going to record this for 5 minutes. So then after that 5 minutes, he gives them a break and then has them come back, sit down, put your fingers on the button again. He goes, okay, now for the next 5 minutes, you can think about anything in the world you want to think about. Let your mind roam around. It doesn't matter, as long as you're not thinking about a white polar bear. Mm-hmm. If you start thinking about a white polar bear, start tapping the button so we can record how often you accidentally begin to think about this one thought that I don't want you to think about. But don't worry, you can think about anything else. Tracks them for a second 5 minutes. At the end of that, tallies the scores, compares the scores, does a meta-analysis. Come to find out, when they weren't supposed to be thinking about the white polar bear, they were all thinking about the white polar bear more than when they were specifically told to think about the white polar bear. And so the conclusions from the study were really not too surprising, but not only does your mind get distracted, but it gets distracted every 3 or 4 seconds. And that's normal. That's not unique. So when someone is telling me, oh, my mind keeps going over to my to-do list or my dinner last night, that's completely normal. And the second thing he found is that if you try to resist a thought, guess what happens? Mm-hmm. It persists. Mm-hmm. There were some people in that study that were obsessed over the white polar bear, right? And so if you try to stop your thoughts in meditation, that's all you're going to think about is that particular thought. There's nothing wrong with your mind. That's normal. That's like fighting the water while you're trying to swim. You're going to drown. That's the nature of the hydrodynamics if you try to fight it. Yeah. If you just relax and you go with it and you do the peanut butter thing, it'll support you. Mm-hmm. And so the mind is like that too. So when people understand that, those two mechanics, then it will set you up to have much more enjoyable experiences, because the things you're trying to get rid of, if you just stopped like the magic eye puzzle and just let them be, they will actually fade away on their own. Mm. And if you don't mind your thoughts becoming more distracted, then you'll start to lose awareness of that as well.
So for you, after all these years, have you meditated today?
Of course.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, yeah.
Yeah, like clockwork every day.
You could ask me if I exercised today, and I could tell you I didn't get to it today.
But it's kind of like if someone is addicted to coffee, right?
Yeah.
You ask them, did you have coffee today?
Yeah,
of course they had their coffee. There's no, if they're addicted to sugar, did you have, some muffin or something this morning? Yeah. Of course.
Yeah.
My mom is addicted to chewing gum. I know she's already had chewing gum today. I haven't talked to her, but I wouldn't be shocked.
So this morning, you start your day. Do you do anything prior to that, or you just kind of?
Sometimes I do a little writing, and then I meditate.
Before? You do some writing? Why?
No,
Because you're
no, no.
fresh. You just wake up and your mind is.
I've been sending out this daily dose of inspiration email.
I saw that
every day since 2016.
That is very brave.
And it goes out at 6 a.m. Pacific time. So most days I wake up in the morning and do that. And if it's not complete, then I have to wake up and finish doing that because I don't usually meditate before that.
Okay.
I do sleep until like around 5:15 or so. And then I'll do that and then I'll meditate. But if I'm in Mexico City or in New York or someplace like that where I'm a few hours ahead, then I'll meditate and then I'll write.
And
so
how
it just
long-
depends on the time zone.
How long do you meditate?
20 minutes.
And do you prescribe, like, let's say, have you ever meditated when you were heartbroken?
I meditate in every conceivable situation.
Do you ever think, oh, I'm having a rough go, I'm going to stay deeper and longer? Or is it just, hey,
It's pure utility at this point for me.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. It's pure utility. And it's what you're experiencing externally it's not an indicator of what you're going to be experiencing internally. For instance, you can wake up and feel great and sit down and meditate and you could be having all kinds of thoughts about some horrible experience that you had 20 years ago. Or you could be feeling heartbroken and sit down and it's like when you go to sleep, you don't control what you dream about.
Right.
Sometimes you can have a wonderful dream. Sometimes you have a terrible dream. But the point is you slept. The dreaming experience itself is a function of stress release. So that's actually an indicator that your body is rehabilitating itself. And that's why when you watch a scary movie and you go to sleep, you could have a nightmare.
Yeah.
So your body has your brain has these mirror neurons, which makes you identify with the character in the horror movie. And so for all your body knows, you're in the horror movie too.
Yeah.
And so once you have that distressful experience of being chased by the villain and almost being hacked up by the chainsaw or whatever the movie involves, and you go to sleep is a way, rest is a way of de-stressing the body. So those thoughts that are related to that bad experience are symptomatic of what's leaving you. So it's going back out of the filter of consciousness that it originally went into when you were watching the movie. So you can be releasing things that happened 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 2 weeks ago, yesterday, while you're meditating, and that can sometimes inform what you're thinking about. And again, when you understand that mechanic, you take those thoughts less personally, or at the very least, you understand that, oh, this is a good thing. That means that thing that I was experiencing 2 years ago, I no longer have to suffer from physically.
Right.
Which is a positive.
Well, absolutely. And there's nothing worse than sometimes trying to get over something so specifically versus doing certain things that allow types of suffering that we've experienced to be released. I think one is easier than the other.
Yeah, I mean, suffering is hard, Even as a meditator, I still go through it. When you go through heartbreak and all that stuff, it's difficult. But it'll be a lot worse if you don't have that outlet for the stress.
The science, can you just remind people? Because now what's exciting is you could hear forever and ever people talking about the positive impacts on the brain and the body of meditation. But now we have, in this day and age where we've got a study for.
Yeah.
But maybe we can just remind people, because I've had to really look at myself on this, where if I sometimes understand the science, I let go in a different way, even with the breathing. And I'm not saying I'm particularly proud of this trait. It's just something I've observed about myself, is I will let go and go deep with something, but sometimes having a sense of also what's happening allows me to let go, which is probably something else I have to work on, right? Like there's other people who want to experience it first. Like I have friends that are, they want to go to Burning Man and they want to experience, they do want to experience all these things. I think I'm hardwired a different ways. And so it was interesting, like with breathing practices or whatever, it's like, oh, I see, why this is so good. But it is very interesting, all the things that they find out what meditation does to your brain. I mean,
yeah, I mean, one statistic that I found really intriguing is this idea, and this is actually an older study, but it's this idea that there tends to be a misnomer about the fact that we use 2 to 10% of our available brain power. Some people say that's, a bunch of rubbish. But what that actually means is that, yes, you are using 2 to 10% at any given time based on the activity that you're engaged in. So you use different parts of your brain based on the activity. And when you meditate, what's been shown is that your whole brain starts to sync up and becomes orderly in a way that it doesn't happen ever outside of meditation. And the body and the mind are both forms. And just like in physics or engineering, form adapts to function. So if your body is able to have that experience on a more regular basis, it'll start to hardwire the brain differently than it's behaving outside of a meditation practice. And you may find yourself having more orderly thinking just in life in general, which explains why a lot of people who prioritize meditation tend to have lots more epiphanies and insights. And it seems to be like they're more intuitive than the average person. But the reality is that they just have rewired their brain. They put in the time to do that. And, the brain is connected to the heart, and the heart actually sends signals as well. And so you have more of that sort of heart-led decision-making, which arguably puts us in better life decisions than just solely listening to your brain or your ego mind, which is always has the primary interest of protecting you. So that, it's not to say that's not important. Obviously, you need to stay away from cliff sides, and you don't want to play with animals that you don't understand and things like that. Right. But you also need some of that heart energy as well. And I don't remember the exact statistic about how much more powerful the heart resonates than the brain when it comes to decision making, but it dwarfs the brain in terms of giving us a more holistic view of what we're experiencing instead of just what we can see, smell, touch, taste, and feel.
Well, I think if we experienced the world as we could, it would be too overwhelming. We wouldn't be able to do anything. And, it's interesting when you have a child, when you go in to the doctor, they say, oh, we're going to check the heart today. They don't say we're going to check the brain. I mean, that, it's like heart math, those, the books and stuff. It's like that thing is going, your heart's moving long before the brain's dialed in. So I think it's such a, the miracle of the heart. I mean, it's powerful. Do people that have known you your whole life, how was the transition to letting you be anew? Because I would imagine that you are.
Yeah. I mean, my family I'm in the weird category. My family, I've been there for a very long time. And, it's kind of, I'm used to it.
Has anyone borrowed, have you gotten them to borrow any of your techniques?
So my brother and my father both spent time in prison, federal prison recently, the last few years. And
they were open to meditation then?
They both requested my meditation book. It took them going to prison for them to start meditating. No one had cracked a book before that. And they wanted to read all my books from prison. Yeah. But what was interesting is that my brother, I went to go visit him one day.
Were they together?
No, they were in separate prisons.
Okay.
They went together. They went in for the same thing, but they were in separate prisons. And I'm in a visiting room with my brother, and there's probably 50 people in this room. And he says, "You see that guy over there in the corner?" And there's another prisoner, because they all have on these green prison outfits. And I was like, "Yeah, I see him." He goes, "That's the head of the prison meditation club." I go, "What are you talking about?" He says, "Well, I read your book. I loved it. I started meditating, and then I passed the book on to him. And he loved it so much that he wanted to teach other guys how to meditate. So he has meditation classes once a week, and they do group meditations. And it was wonderful to hear that, because that was actually my intention when I first wrote that book. It's like I wanted, because, to get in a room with me nowadays, you have to spend like $1,000+, and, you have to fly to wherever I am teaching. And this stuff, I'm so passionate about it, but it's not scalable because it's all very
it's your real hours.
Intimate, my real hours. So I wanted to create something that people who were minimum wage workers and burger flippers and truck drivers and inmates could use to also access, these different states. And so that was one of my proudest moments as an author, is hearing that somebody in the prison got a hold of the book.
Yeah.
And maybe that was the point of them going to jail, you know, from a spiritual perspective, is that we needed more of this kind of thing in prisons.
Yeah. Do you think, well, it's like church. It's like, you know, like you said, it's that questioning. It's the asking. Are they going to get out soon?
Oh, they're out.
Oh, good.
They're both out. Yeah.
Okay. Are they still?
My brother was in for a year.
Wait, are they still meditating?
No, of course not.
No, come on.
There's TV. There's social media.
Okay, let's talk about that.
Okay.
There's a million distractions, and we talk, you know, in life, like, and you talk about it specifically, work and inspiration, right? Like it's this constant calibration of like, we need to kind of be moved and mobilized, but then it's like, it's like you're going 20 minutes.
Yeah. You're
doing your daily dose every day. It's like these things that are, you know, and it could be a labor of love. It could be things that we want to do, but it's still a form of discipline and work. So when you have a group, I can see how you inspire them. How do you encourage them to put something in place, some bumpers up for them to do what we would call work?
Yeah, that's a good question. There's a couple of things that are happening. So in my dad and my brother's example, you know, getting out of prison can be very difficult, rebuilding your life, because they make it very difficult for people to get a bank account, for you to get a credit card, for you to
even after a year.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, because you have this record now, and you have to report that every time you're trying to go get a job somewhere.
Yeah.
And, you know, if you have to go rent an apartment, and you have to report that.
Yeah.
So obviously, you know, everyone's so afraid now that you don't want to let some convicted felon stay in that, you know, apartment building, because what if something happens? Right?
Yeah.
You don't want to let them drive the school bus, because what you get sued.
Yeah.
You know, we live in such a litigious society, so it's very difficult. And then we have Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So when people are at the lower end of that hierarchy, they're not thinking about meditation. You know, they're thinking about, how am I going to pay my bills? How am I going to take care of my family? How am I going to feed my kids, et cetera? And meditation seems like an extracurricular activity if I have time for it, if I have, you know, the interest in it and all of that. So you have to understand that as a meditation teacher, that not everybody is in the self-actualization phase of their life, where meditation is very much essential to being on your purpose, living your path. Like, people don't care about that if they can barely get there.
It moves into the luxury.
It's a luxury. Yeah. It's for privileged people, etc.
Yeah.
But I will say this: stress doesn't discriminate.
Right.
Stress doesn't discriminate. Whether you meditate, you don't meditate, stress doesn't care. It's all over you all day long, every day. In fact, the lower you are on that hierarchy, the more you're probably having to grapple with day-to-day stress. And what's been shown is that meditation is like kryptonite to stress. And if you don't have some sort of release valve for the stress, it's not going to end well. So that's the approach I like to take with people who say, I don't have time to meditate, is, well, you know, if you're living your life under the constant influence of stress, you're not making the best decisions for you and your family. You obviously don't have a large margin of error. You have to be more on than off on a given basis. You have to sleep as well as you can, because you may have to work 2 jobs. So you need to learn how to optimize your rest. And these are things that meditation can do very effectively. If you don't have that as a clean outlet for the stress, then you're probably going to default to a dirty outlet.
Yeah,
alcohol, porn, you know, excessive television, and, you know, these kinds of things that are, again, normalized. And if the body continues to experience stress in those ways, it's ultimately going to manifest itself physically. And you're going to get diagnosed with something that you're going to have to be on medication for, very expensive medication for the rest of your life. So, you know, I do my best to kind of scare them into at least considering that there's another alternative to all of this. And all it takes is 20 minutes, and here's a book. You know, you can go to a library and check it out for free, or, you know, go on YouTube. There's somebody did a Blinkist version of it. It's 20 minutes. And when I first saw this, I was like, oh, let me listen to this bullshit and see how they butchered my But actually, it was fantastic.
Really?
It was great. Yeah. I was like, oh, this is really good. So I send that to people who don't even have the 3 hours to listen to the full audio version, or who don't want to go to the library and check out the book. And I'm happy that there are other alternatives that are, low cost or free that people can use to at least get your foot in the door and just introduce yourself to the idea of it and just see what happens.
Do you have, and I know you have a deep practice, but people ask me, they go, oh, do you meditate? And I go, sometimes I'll do breathing. But I'm going to be honest with you, after this interview, and I'm not BSing you. I'm going to look to reinstall a practice, because I think for me, I look at it and I go, oh, there's so much to do, and it's like, it's 20 minutes. I waste 20 minutes all the time. Mm-hmm. I could do something productive, like in the way that's not productive. I could, to sit, to not, get on the organizer or answer emails. Sometimes I don't know how this got put up as something so important. Because the other idea would be is that maybe, someone would ask you too, like your kids or something, like, oh, what are you doing? Are you doing something different? But anyway, I think I do a version of like I call it the active meditation, where if I have moments that I'm by myself and I'm not doing something, like maybe I'm taking a shower, I'm just sitting, it is kind of an internal check-in. Like, hey, how am I feeling? How are my relationships? Do I need to apologize to anyone? Whatever that check-in is. When you meditate, and I get the sort of the spiritual aspect, even the physical aspects, the mental aspect. Is there another technique that you're using throughout your day that you also use just to kind of check in with yourself?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What does that look like?
I try to be really grateful all the time. And whenever I feel myself getting frustrated or caught up in some comparison or feeling regretful or worried about what's going to happen next, just try to drop back into gratitude as much as possible. And, I've equated it to this. It's like if you have a blog that's called Red Cars, and your daily responsibility is to notice all the red cars you see and to write something about what do they all have in common, right? That person is going to see way more red cars on a daily basis everywhere than someone who's not being intentional about seeing red cars. If you ask the average person, did you see a red car today? I don't know, maybe one or two. But reality is maybe there was 20 of them. So this daily dose of inspiration email that I've done 2,500 times now in a row has put me in a position without even trying to be inspired and to think of things to be appreciative for all the time. And that was kind of by design. I didn't think I'd do it this long, and it's still happening, but it's really hard to, especially when I just stop and just think of it, to not be grateful about something. And that really, it uplifts me, right? But I put in the work. I really put in the work, because we're talking thousands and thousands of hours of staring at a computer and reflecting back on conversations and things that happened throughout my day and trying to find what was the good in this thing that happened that I didn't love, because those are the emails that usually get the most engagement, or the personal stories and things that, on the surface didn't seem very inspiring, but trying to keep myself open to what's the lesson behind all of this. And so yeah, that's been a helpful thing. And somebody was asking me the other day, interestingly enough, says, what happens if you get sick? And I said, I actually haven't gotten sick in these 7 years.
I believe it.
And a part of me thinks that that's my health insurance.
Yeah. Yeah.
Showing up. And I think about that when I don't want to do it. I think, well, this is my health insurance. And it's different from the stuff I send in to Blue Cross Blue Shield every month. That's accident coverage. That's not health insurance. That's
catastrophic, right?
Yeah, that's catastrophic accident coverage, worst case scenario. But that's not your real health insurance. Your real health insurance is the thing that you're here to do. Are you doing that? Are you showing up for that on a regular basis? So there's no easy happening. It's just, it's difficult, but you get to choose your difficult, and you get to choose a difficult that feels most aligned with you. meditating being one of those things. Just making the time for that. And then whatever your passion stuff is.
When you, and this is just sort of as a like human being question, like you're a big, strong guy. And I'm just curious, when you experience anger or maybe someone gets in your space inappropriately, you know, what do you typically, how have you learned to show up for that?
That's another great question. I think it depends on the situation. Can I beat the guy?
Totally. I think you could beat most guys.
No. I just try to be as honest as possible. You know, I try to express my truth as much as possible and to confront the situations, because I used to be very non-confrontational.
You were non-confrontational?
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Well, you probably weren't allowed to be. Is that right? Were you in a family dynamic that it was like there was no room for that?
No. I can't put it on my family.
Okay.
I just, I haven't been in a whole lot of confrontations in my life. So when they do crop up.
Yeah. I mean, you lived in New York City. You know, it's like you live in a few places.
Yeah.
If someone's around. I guess what I'm saying is most of us look at emotions in this sort of very clear way. Like, oh, I'm happy. I'm angry. I'm aggressive. I'm all these things. But when
I see what you're saying.
Yeah. So when I'm curious,
for me, it's an expectation problem. So that's, if I recognize myself getting angry, then I say to myself, okay, my expectations are misaligned with reality.
But what if someone's just pissing you off and it's like maybe a guy's had too many cocktails and now he's in your space?
So I've got to take responsibility for that. Why am I in this place with these people who are drinking all this alcohol?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So that's on me. That's not on them. This is the symptom of being in this space. And if I didn't have the wherewithal to be able to discern whether this is the space I need to be in or not, then I deserve whatever I'm getting in this situation. So I try to remove myself from those kinds of spaces as much as possible. And, you know, here's my other theory is that when you, and I'd say this is theory because I don't think there are a lot of studies on this stuff, but when you are a regular practitioner of something like meditation, you have a more fine-tuned internal radar that will guide you, and it'll tell you as you're about to walk into these places, you hear, you know, like the alarm, people are at Target or whatever, when people are walking out with their thing on the item, you hear something like that, you feel something like that when it's like, nope, don't go in here. This is not for you. And, or with a relationship, nope, that's not the relationship for you. Or nope, that's not the friendship for you. Or, you know, so you start having a different kind of relationship with this idea of what's for you and what's not for you. And it's pretty apparent in my experience. It's pretty apparent. And when you start to listen to it more and more, because here's the thing, and we can all run this experiment, right? Everybody listening to this, you and I can run this experiment. When bad things have happened and you trace the steps back, something warned you that something was off.
Yeah.
Something's off. And you ignored it. And I've been in that boat many times.
Yeah.
You ignore it, you move forward, and you get burned. But you can't deny that something warned you beforehand.
Yeah.
It's very rare to get completely blindsided by something. Now, people may get news out of the blue, but there were signs. If you look back at that relationship or friendship or that job, there were signs that something fishy was going on.
But how do people react to your brutal honesty where because I can think of a situation right now where it's like, okay, I'm not surprised this happened. That the minute it peeps up, you know, or the second time, let's say, so then you start to recognize it as now it is maybe a go-to behavior of this person. And with brutal honesty, you go, hey, I don't think this is going to work out. But barely. I
never give brutal honesty.
But okay, so that's what I mean. So
I speak the sweet truth.
Oh.
Okay. And the sweet truth means, and this is a principle in the book, Travel Light.
Yes.
You give what you want to receive.
Yes.
So I was talking to some friends of mine this morning. We had a little men's group meeting on a walk. And I was saying that because a couple of us described situations where we were abandoned by girlfriends. out of the quotes, out of the blue. But of course, nothing happens out of the blue. Yeah, nothing happens out of the blue. So,
what was the guy's name?
In our mind, they're the villain. We're the victim. When something bad happens to you, we automatically project villain status onto the person that offended us or did the thing that was insensitive, and we're the innocent victim who just took the brunt of the whole thing. But have we ever woken up and felt like a villain? Did we ever wake up and feel like Lex Luthor or, some bad person? Probably not. Probably not that often. Probably because we have context for our life, we feel like we're just doing the best we can. We're feeling a certain way. We don't know really how to communicate it. They've demonstrated that they don't really accept honesty very well. So let me keep postponing. I'll keep micro moving in this other direction.
Right.
And so then we do something that we may not even be aware that we did it or aware how badly the other person took it. And so just kind of making the presumption that everybody's doing the best they can.
Yeah.
So if I'm going to jump in someone's face
not even jump. Let's say I'm going to make a scenario. It's a work thing, and someone's approached you to do a project, which many people have, and then you think, "Oh, this is interesting," and I'm going to start on the path of pursuit. Doesn't mean lock down contracts. It just means I'm going to. But you see a behavior that you go, "I'm not going to be in a foxhole with this person in work." What is the sweet truth on that? Like, is it, hey, I really appreciate this idea. I'm just not prepared at this time to move forward.
And that's what it is. You show appreciation.
Yeah.
You start with appreciation. You start with recognition, validation, verification that, hey, you gave this very generous offer to me. Yeah. Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it. I'm just not in this space right now. I realized for myself, I had to come to Jesus moment with myself.
And I'm just not there.
I'm just not there right now. I wouldn't be able to show up fully in this in the same way that I think you would want or
you deserve. But they are pushy. Maybe they're East Coast and they're like, no, come on, it's the time and we can do it. And they just keep on coming. How do you manage to keep that sort of firm but yet direct sweetness intact?
Yeah. If you see that, if you could start getting evidence that people don't have good sense of boundaries, whether there's your boundaries or their own boundaries, then you have to, you have to be a little bit more direct. So your directness is correlated to their lack of boundaries.
I see.
And, again, there were signs that they didn't have any boundaries beforehand.
Sure.
You missed them all. Maybe it was, I read this article about somebody who was at a lunch with some agent in Hollywood, and they were like the agent was taking food off of their plate and eating it without asking for permission. Now that's not, anything to ruin your whole day behind, but that's clear indication this person doesn't really have strong boundaries, So if they end up doing something later,
you can't be surprised.
You can't be shocked.
Right.
You have to look at everything. And that ability to see it, that's the magic eye puzzle we talked about with meditation. And I equate meditation, like regular practice, kind of like Wonder Woman's lasso. I don't know if you know the superpower of her lasso.
Of course.
What is it?
It's to tell the truth.
You tell the truth.
Yeah.
It's a truth serum. Meditation is truth serum. It's really hard to BS yourself when you've been meditating on a regular basis. You almost have to confront the reality of the situation and then make a move away from that or to relate to it in a different way. It's easy to do it if you're under stress because you're thinking to yourself, I need the money. Let me just deal with it. I'll figure it out later. So stress makes you gullible.
Yeah.
Meditation makes you bold. Meditation makes you bold. People have it completely backwards. It's not meditation that makes you gullible. Stress makes you gullible. Stress makes you tolerate things you would never tolerate otherwise and do things that compromise your integrity and your dignity.
That's why I ask about the moving away, because when every great sort of person I know that kind of really does have strength, and when I say strength, I mean compassion, loving strength, they're always moving away from things that aren't
serving them.
Right. And they're not looking to engage in something, you know, aggressive. So that's why I ask, because for me, that is the ultimate strength. And I'm always wondering how, you know, you keep moving in and out of it. What about a romantic relationship? No one's managed to pin you down yet. How did you... Well, it's true. I mean, come on. I mean, you might have friends, but I'm just saying, how do you, because your people have, I'm sure, tried and you're in it and you think, okay, this isn't going to be the long story. I have to lovingly and gracefully maybe move out of it. I would imagine that's a little harder.
I think relationships are like the equalizer. No matter who you are, you meditator, relationship therapist.
Yeah, okay.
You're giving a TED talk on relationships. Everybody's going through it because the way life works is it gives you the exact configuration of attributes in your partner that will expose whatever you need to work on. So you can be healed in these 60% of life, areas, but those are the other 40%. And that's who you attract. You attract the person that's going to help you work on those. So I see partners like a little bit like professors. You know, like they're here to help me and I'm here to help them in some way, and just try not to personalize it too much. Try not to get too caught up in the character flaws of the teacher and try to really pay attention to the lessons. And something I did many years ago that's, I feel like it was a game changer, is I took breaking up off the table. So I'm very slow to get into relationships, but once I'm in, I'm in. Now, obviously, if someone turns out to be a serial killer, that's a whole other situation. Yeah. But I mean, the idea is to trust my intuition enough when I'm forging the relationship and make sure that this is something that I feel like I can really build and give, contribute something positive to. And then once that happens, I'm in. And because when you have the idea that, I can break up in the back of your mind, you're never fully committed.
No. Yeah.
When something happens, you're in an argument, you're thinking to yourself, well, I'm not taking this anymore. This is not. So I've noticed that there's a shift where it's like, okay, we're going to figure this out. And whether they decide to stay in it is a different story.
Okay. So let's just say as somebody, I've been in a very long relationship.
How long have you guys been together now?
We'll be together 28 years in November. And, I can say that one of the attributes in my situation that I really appreciate from coming from my side is I feel from Laird sort of a very direct energy. I feel like he's present, he's here, he's in it. Now, there are times, and this is why I'm asking this as a question, when you have people that become sort of, for lack of a better word, like more self-aware, more evolved, there's a balance there that sometimes for me as a partner, I would wonder if it would make me be like a little grabby more. And I know that's probably a me thing where, because it's like you're in your containment, you're pretty good. And I always think Laird and I separately were trying to make ourselves happy on our own because we know it doesn't work the other way. But I'm not going to lie, when he looks at me and I'm like, oh, there he is, it does something for me. So I wonder if your partners, are they like light? Are you like, just really in it? Because when you're peaceful or calm or thoughtful and balanced, your responses are pretty measured. That chicks must drive him crazy. Does it not?
How being balanced and stable drives people crazy.
That's why I'm saying, like, how do you do it? Because I'm just, I am trying. I am working. I am careful with my words. I don't want to have conflict with my partner. I'm not looking to push anyone's buttons. I'm not interested. But maybe you're able to communicate that from a different place. I just am not obviously in that dynamic, but I'm so curious. I'm like, it's like that. Ugh.
Well, as you astutely pointed out, I'm still not married. So, it's been, it's challenging. It's like riding a bull. I'm no, picnic being with me because I've done so much work.
Yeah.
I'm super honest with myself. I'm super direct with myself. A lot of that comes out in just my day-to-day communication. Even my friendships, I don't have a lot of superficial friendships.
Yeah.
We go deep or we just don't talk.
Yeah.
And so naturally, the relationships that I feel light me up the most are very self-aware, very self-reflective, very take responsibility for your stuff.
Yeah.
But, you know, I've also dated women who are a lot younger than me in places like LA, where there's no incentive to really develop your character. But I also find that, you know, here's the thing. I find that the people who are attracted to me, ironically, they don't drink. I'm not a drinker. So usually the whole thing about, you know, frequency, like energy attracts, you know, I feel like that's what's been happening for me as well. And yeah, it's not easy. It's not easy at all. That's probably the hardest part of my life, is just being in a relationship to people. Yeah. And,
well, because it's sometimes, and I have other friends, I'm friendly with Byron Katie and a few other people. Sometimes when people they've spent this time to do this work, they almost become contained. Like Katie had a family before, so she had 3 kids, and you know, so you know, her life got kind of messy before she sort of had her own experience. Sure. But I almost feel like when people do this work, you become self-contained and like okay.
Yeah.
Which makes it hard. Like, do we have to be a little dysfunctional to be like, yeah, I know, let's play marriage and family and really make it crazy?
Yeah. You know what's changed a lot for me, or evolved for me, is I don't take it personally anymore. So when they do lash out, I'm able to sit with that and not be offended, not make it about, you know, something is wrong with the dynamic. Yeah. And to speak that sweet truth and to validate, you know, the situation. Like, I could see how you would feel like that. And, and yeah, I'm here's how I'm gauging success in relationship these days. Okay. Before, you gauge success as longevity. How long were you together? Right? Means nothing.
Nothing.
Now it's how much can you be yourself? To what degree can you be yourself? Can you really feel like, because what usually happens is you start off yourself. That's what everybody falls in love with, is the real you, the honest you, the open you. And then you get closer and closer, and then people get triggered. Maybe I get triggered, maybe they get triggered.
You start moving.
And then you start acting. You start the play. That's when the play starts.
Yeah.
So then you're the relationship version of you. And then when you're talking to your homies, that's when you're the real version of you. Yeah. When you're reporting what you're really feeling, what's really happening. And so if you're in a situation where you bifurcate it into a different version of yourself, that's the beginning of the end. Yeah. And so I'm very aware of that. And my call to myself is, okay, she's not the villain. I'm not the victim. That's an old story. Yeah. We all have great intentions. We all want this to work, but we also come from these different experiences. None of us got a playbook when we landed here on Earth on how to be in a relationship. So you have to account for that. And she's younger than I am. I have more life experience, which means the onus is on me to try to understand.
Right. She's at a different place. I like how you keep saying younger, though. It's good.
Where she is.
Hey.
And, well, I still want to have kids, one day.
I wanted to ask you, but I didn't want to ask you.
I still want to have kids. I still see myself having a child.
You know what's funny? I really want you to have kids so you can come back and I can really talk to you about when you haven't slept in 2 years.
What happens then with meditation?
Yeah, and you're meditating, your kid's poking your finger in your eye, and you're like, ha ha ha. What's funny is I think I was somewhat myself, but Laird and I, early in our relationship, within 5 years, like we almost got divorced. Mm-hmm. So I actually promised myself I would only be myself. Mm. He's only been himself because that's who he is. Mm-hmm. But I realized that I got myself into places that I was like, that's not me. Mm. So I'm going to vow to go right at it, deal with a little discomfort because I got to be myself. And I think what you're saying is so important. And that doesn't mean I have girlfriend talk, like I save poor Laird's ear space for things that I only talk to my girlfriends about, but it would be something I could have a conversation in front of him. It wouldn't be not lined up. Yeah. I'm just trying to save a guy
Yeah, I think that's a great litmus test. Is if you are saying things to your friends that you would never say, or you'd be horrified if they found out.
You can't do that.
That would not be. You've bifurcated.
Yeah,
you're in two different. You're in the play now.
Yeah, no,
you're
that's
in Broadway.
That's a no-go.
Yeah,
that's a no-go. So let's talk about minimalism and being a minimalist, and even now, and this for me is a reflection of your long practice that you would arrive here. It's like coaching. The best coaches say the least. To your point, they know exactly. You go up to that street, here's the name of it. You're going to make a right. There'll be a yellow house on the right. You go down 3 on the left. Like, exactly. And so the fact that you wrote this book, it doesn't surprise me. But I am so fascinated, and obviously Travel Light is out of your experience. Maybe just share with us how because when I was reading about, selling all your stuff and like kind of putting everything into one, I have to say that, and I'm not going to say it's a gender thing, but as a female and as a mom and all this stuff, I was like, oh, could I do that? But I'm so interested in were you like, oh, this is the next step?
Yeah, I mean, there's a backpack right there on the stairs. That's about as big as that's actually bigger than the backpack that I currently have with all my stuff in it. But I also am very open in the book. You do a lot
of laundry is all I know. Okay, that's all.
Every day. I'm also open in the book about the fact that this is not about getting rid of your stuff externally. It's about getting rid of your stuff internally. And so when you do that, you may find yourself making life choices that don't make a lot of sense, but maybe they're aligned in some way with wherever your path happens to be in that moment in time. And for me, it was, I want to have this experience. I didn't know why.
You weren't scared? And I know you manage your emotions, but did you sit on it for a few months?
I sat on it for a year or so.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Tried to talk myself out of it, and because again, this is, okay, so I was 45 years old when I did this. So I was no spring chicken. And I had a really beautiful 2-bedroom place, 10 minutes from the beach in Venice, very highly desirable area. And I'm wanting to have a family. So I'm thinking, okay, this is not going to make my dating prospects, easier when they find out that I'm living from a backpack. I don't have a home. I'm staying in some hotel, and I don't have any plan about what's going to happen, in a month. Like, that doesn't make women get excited to be in a relationship with me. So it kind of flew in the face of all the things that I was saying that I wanted. But at the same time, I also had the truth. I had the lasso around me, and the lasso was saying, you don't feel connected to this apartment anymore. This is not your place anymore. And you don't feel connected to Los Angeles. You don't feel excited when you land in Los Angeles again after being on the road for a while. And all these other possibilities of traveling around and being in different places and being fully there, because you're not thinking, who's going to move my car to the other side of the street? Did somebody water my plants? All these kinds of things. You need to cut ties from all that. This is not a forever thing. It's just a for now thing. You're going to see the experiences, like maybe you write a book about it one day. Who knows? So I had the lasso around, and I had to acknowledge, okay, that resonates more than forcing the situation to be something that it wasn't. And so I had that experience enough times to recognize, okay, I can try to fight this thing, but it's just going to be an exercise in futility. And that's how you make yourself sick. In my experience, that's how you create situations you don't want to ultimately have, by ignoring that voice. And I've been meditating for, almost 20 years at that point. So it was really loud. And I talk about that in the book. Like, you don't want it to be a still, small voice. You can ignore that easy all day long. You want it to be a loud, annoying voice. Like you're.
But what is that voice saying to you? Like, how does it talk to you?
It's saying, it's time to go. This apartment is no longer, this is not your place anymore. Light. I know, but I don't want to hear it, Light.
Yeah.
So it's like that. It's that kind of relationship. And that's the only way you're really going to take action, because when you are following your curiosity or your heart or whatever you want to call it, is never going to say, do something that's going to make you more comfortable.
No.
It's going to say, get in that ice bath. I don't want to get in the ice bath. Get in the ice bath. It's here. You know, you didn't get dressed up for nothing. It's only for 3 minutes. You'll live. And so you get in the ice bath. And so it's like a constant life ice bath when you're following your heart.
Yeah.
But as a result, you're becoming more resilient. You're getting stronger. You can do more things and you become more capable. And that capability comes into play whenever you are engaged in your mission, because whatever your mission entails, it's not going to be easy, and you are going to be tempted to quit, and people are going to push back, and you're going to be on your own for long stretches of time. And if you haven't trained yourself to do these things by doing hard things and finding comfort in discomfort, then you are going to talk yourself out of it. And it's completely normal to do that, because that's what we've been indoctrinated to believe, is that comfort is the thing you should seek out, not living a life that feels aligned with your internal guidance. And so this book is a call to moving away from that comfort, which is ultimately not fulfilling or satisfying beyond a few days, and back to what you're truly here to do, which is different for there's 8 billion reasons to be alive, and we all have our own. And it changes from season to season. And so you have to be present to how it's changing, because the thing that gets you on your path is not going to be the same thing that helps you sustain your path.
So this, can we call it purpose?
Sure.
Is that
fair? If it's not triggering for your listeners, I like calling it purpose.
I mean, that word, trigger.
Trigger.
Yeah, I'm going to be the anti-trigger. I want to make it that nothing can trigger me.
Nothing triggers you, okay.
Just don't hurt little children, then I'm okay. Everything else, or animals. Did you? I mean, I read your book and I watched things. I think for me, what dawned on me, because you're a person who can go anywhere, you will meet people. You because of your antenna, people will come towards you. But I couldn't help but think about. And it's so funny because we are alone, even when we're in a family. That's just the truth. But that I thought about your loneliness, or if you experienced loneliness.
Absolutely. Sometimes. Yeah. I would say, to be perfectly honest with you, I don't feel lonely. I definitely feel lonesome sometimes.
Yeah.
And the difference is I'm actually choosing to be by myself more than I'm choosing to go out to some social event.
Yeah.
And a lot of that could just be, I don't want to be around a bunch of people drinking, or, or I'm really enjoying my time. And I'm at the life stage now, and this can change, but I'm at the life stage now where if I'm not in a relationship, which I happen to be in one now, but when I'm not in one, I'd almost rather be by myself than be just hanging out, talking about a bunch of stuff that's not really inspiring me.
Yeah.
And it's not to say I can't have small talk. Absolutely. When I'm with my friends from growing up or college, we can be silly and make fun of each other and all that. But at some point we have to talk about something real.
Yeah.
And
do you ever find that the entanglement with humans, though, is part of, it's like that practice, that's where we're getting tested and we get to really show like, oh, my skills improving. So there's that one relationship with nature, and then the relationship with ourselves, but then the sort of things that we get. So, it's choosing those people that we have that with, but do you have kind of other practices where you go, I'm going to put myself in school? Like the way, when you travel, I would imagine you're having to manage and deal with people that you wouldn't necessarily choose. So I guess I'd love to know why Mexico City, because was that the first place, right?
I mean,
I know you've
until the pandemic. When I left in 2018,
right,
until the pandemic started, I'd been around the world like 3 times, and I had always heard about Mexico City, but I'd never been there. And then I finally went there in 2019 to work on my previous book, Knowing Where to Look, because I just needed a place to go post up and write, and I fell in love with it. It was fantastic because I'm a big Europe person. I like all the walking that people do in Europe. And I like that summertime Europe weather. And that's what Mexico City is. Yeah. Mexico City is eternal spring weather because it's very high in altitude. And it is a walking culture because it's obviously was colonized by the Europeans. So they created like basically little Madrid. And you can just walk. You can easily get 12,000, 13,000 steps a day just walking your errands and going to cafes and going to the gym and just, taking a call. And it's beautiful weather. It's never humid. Kind of like LA in that way, except it doesn't get cold at night. And it's one of the safest places I've ever been, ironically. People, every time someone who had never been out of the country said, I'm in Mexico City. Is it safe? Is the cartel?
Yeah, sure.
I'm like, I just was walking through downtown LA the other day. Talk about feeling unsafe. Yeah. Like somebody's going to jump out with a hypodermic needle or a machete or something. No, Mexico City is super safe and just a vibrant culture. I just love it. It's very creatively inspirational for things like writing.
Do you need a certain environment or do you have a certain process for writing? Because you've written several books now and they're all quite different. Do you do it differently? Have you done it different for each one? Or is there sort of a way that works best for you?
So the way I've been structuring my books, I've changed that in the sense that I don't write books to be read from cover to cover. I write books to be opened anywhere. Like we actually read books. Like when people go pick up a book, nobody starts on the page one. First time you pick up a book, you crack it open in the middle. You kind of flip through it, and that's how I write the books now. So they're written in vignettes and anecdotes, and so that you can be on the toilet or you can be, just sitting somewhere in your house, and you only have a couple of minutes to read something, and you want to read a good story, and that has a nice little moral or lesson at the end, and then you can put it down and come back to it later. And maybe it'll be the thing you needed to hear at that time. Yeah. So it's evergreen. It's something that hopefully somebody who can come across it 200 years from now and still get something relevant from it, in the way that however they're living life 200 years from now.
Do you sit down and you go, okay, I'm going to work for X amount of time or X amount of pages? Or you just go till you go, okay,
it depends on where I am in the deadline. If I'm like a week before the deadline and I'm behind, then yes, I have to do very focused writing. But ideally, and this is where the daily dose of inspiration emails come into play. Like that's what it is. I'm writing stories. So for every story I end up sending out, I probably wrote 3. And one may not be appropriate for a short, pithy email, but it may be sort of a longer story. And that may go into the book. And so yeah, a lot of the content nowadays I draw from the things that I've already, because I keep an archive. So I'll go through it and see if it inspires any other memories or if any of the stories connect and things like that. But as far as my writing process, I don't really have a daily or weekly process if I'm not working on a specific project. And it just depends on how much time I have to write the project.
Right. The thing is, from a work point of view, it's an interesting balance of if we're productive and things are, and I put it in quotes, successful, then we also will later have more freedom or opportunities to have new choices. See, I always look at success as just an opportunity to have choices, to either work with the people that I want to work with, or that's how I look at it. Not more, just those choices that you want, the quality. How do you... Because it's like you want to do the work and do really good work for the sake of doing the work. Like you're here, one of your purposes is to share and teach and to talk about the positive power of meditation. But within that, sometimes we get slotted with, how many are you going to sell? Or how many people are following you and how many likes? Where do you manage that side of, and this is a selfish question, not being competitive, not looking left or right in comparison, but just saying, I'm going to do what I came here to do. I'm going to do that to the best of my ability. Try to stay clear with my intention. Of course, you want to be prosperous and all these things, but it's not first. are you calibrating that? Like, how do you do that? Because you're and you're also like in this external thing, like here you are, you know? So I wonder, because I think that's a constant, and it's so easy to kind of get yanked off your track.
100%. Yeah. So I'm going to answer that question with another experience that may be a little controversial. Okay.
Are you going to say trigger? Or...
So I don't think monogamy is natural.
Okay. Is that controversial? That's like the oldest story I've ever heard.
I mean,
come on now.
Depends on who we're talking to, I guess. But I'm a monogamous person.
I'm a realist.
I'm a monogamous person because it's just easier.
That's all it is.
It's just easier. I don't want to. I don't want to fight an uphill battle. I don't want to die on that hill, you know. And I'd rather just. I'd rather just.
I understand.
Enjoy my little thoughts around that, and keep doing what I have to do to keep this other thing on the rails.
Yeah.
Okay. And I feel like the whole idea of marketing and promoting books, it's just easier just to do it than it is to. I don't think it's natural to do it. Mm-hmm. And you can very well not care about the numbers and all of that, but it's just easier. It's easier to get a book deal when you care, when you show that you care, when you work towards that. It's easier to write the book because you're thinking about that instead of, you know, and that's what I talk about in the book. I call it the freedom of choicelessness. Once you make the choice and you make that choice that's aligned with what you do care about the most, which is, I got the vaccine. Now it's a whole thing about, you know, did you get the vaccine, and why did you get the vaccine, and you know what. I just got it because I just wanted to travel, and I didn't want any problems when I was traveling. Right. So I got the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, which probably wore off the same day, right? But I just wanted the ease, and that was more important to me than getting into some debate about, if anything is going to take me out, it's not going to be the vaccine. It's going to be keeping the cell phone 3 inches from my ball sack, you know, for 20 years every day.
That'll definitely keep the family name for
that's
sure.
Gonna, That's going to take me out a lot faster than a vaccine. So you have to assess the situation and decide what is most important right now. Is it more important to be able to, because when you write a book and market a book, you're auditioning for the next book deal. That's what you're doing. And if a publisher sees you didn't really do anything on the previous book, they're not going to give you a book deal for the next book. Yeah. And it may not be until your 5th book, and that's the one that really gives you all the choices that you want to work with whoever you want to work with. Yeah. Right.
Or even if you say you want to donate all the proceeds for kids' health or whatever,
at least you have the option to do that.
That's right.
So, you know, and there are things that you're going to have to do to create that option for yourself that you're probably not going to want to do it. Probably, just like, you know, being in a relationship, you probably may not feel like showering before you go to bed, you know, every night. But you're not doing it for you. You're doing it because the other person may have a strong preference that everybody showers, and so you take one for the team. Yeah, and you do that to keep, because it's more important for you, for that other person to be super present in the relationship than it is for you to, you know, stand on your little soapbox about why. You know, you don't need, actually humans don't need to shower, and we weren't born showering, and, you know, all this kind of stuff that probably has all kinds of scientific evidence based around it. But you have to ask yourself in all situations, what's the most important thing? And then you choose from there.
Work from there. Yeah. And has the meditation, because sometimes these jobs, right, it's an entanglement of like, you have to be confident enough to stand up there. You're doing public speaking, you're doing these things. And yet, you're always checking your whys and your ego and all of that. Does the meditation make that pretty easy, where you can just sort of self-regulate and notice yourself pretty quickly?
I would say easier or less difficult. It makes it slightly less difficult. Yeah. The thing I think that the really, the big difference is you are more prone to be yourself in all scenarios with consistent meditation than you're going to try to pretend like you're someone else. And the reason is because you're no longer seeking fulfillment in the outcome of whatever the thing is. Yeah. You're bringing the fulfillment to the situation. So you still want to do good because you're there to serve, and you want to make sure that you're doing the homework so that you're making maximum impact in this from a service capacity, as opposed to, I hope they like me, I hope they laugh at my jokes, I hope this, I hope that. And
Good
then
luck.
you forget what your train of thought because you're so caught up in what they're doing or what they're thinking. And I'm not immune to that. That's part of it, you know.
Sure.
So you have to constantly sort of fight that back as well and battle that. But I think it makes it a little bit less difficult to fight that ego mind that's trying to get you caught up in what they're thinking about you.
Yeah, that just keeps you from all the really good stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, usually. So this minimalist approach, how do you bring that into, you know, food and movement and sort of your lifestyle practices? Has this kind of bled into everything, or has it always been in place and then this was just kind of now doing it in your external world, at least for right now, having this minimalist approach?
That's a great question too. The thing with the lifestyle choices is that, again, it's different for everybody and it depends on where you are in your life. Like right now, for instance, for me, physically, I'm not interested in getting a six-pack. I don't want to have a gut, but I also don't want to have a six-pack. It's not to say I don't want to have one. It's just not as important to me at this stage in my life. So I'm on more of a sort of maintenance program for lifting, working out. I love working out. I love going to the gym. I love lifting heavy weights. I only do 5 sets of 5 every day. I do 1 weight exercise, 1 compound exercise, 5 sets of 5. Every now and again, I'll deviate. If I'm in an environment where people are walking underwater with weights, I'll do that. You know, that'll be kind of fun. But left up to my own devices, I try to do the things that I can replicate in the most places on my busiest day. Because for me, consistency is the most important thing and not trying to be exotic. When I was younger, you know, being exotic, novelty, all that was more important. But now it's just consistency. So that will inform maybe perhaps where you stay, what you travel with. If you don't have access to a gym or to an exercise bar outside in a park, maybe you carry a resistance band around with you, which I did for a long time.
You did?
Yeah, 100%.
With handles or just a round?
Just the round one.
Okay. Just
the round one, yeah. And then I'd spend a lot of time on YouTube learning variations of different things. So how do you optimize or work out some sort of iteration for a bench press without a bench press? How do you do it from with a resistance band around your shoulders? Or how do you do back if you only have a traffic light to work with, or things like that? And just trying to just thinking outside of the box, and then building up that muscle of consistency as much as possible. And then that bleeds into diet. How can I optimize my diet in the most places on my busiest day? Okay, so I'm not interested in counting macros because that's just way too heady for me, and I don't want to have the six-pack as badly. But I do want to maintain muscle as I'm getting into my 50s and things like that. So what's the most important thing? Protein. So if you up your protein and you get enough protein, it actually displaces all the other stuff. So then I tracked my protein for like a few days. I got a little scale, went on YouTube, went on Google, how many grams of protein is an egg? Because I eat eggs a lot. That's an easy thing to find in most places. How many grams of protein is this? How many, just chicken breast, this and that. And I kind of worked out the configuration and how to get a reasonable amount of protein for my goal. And so I just focus on that, diet-wise. And so you do that with every little aspect of life. With relationships, communication is the most important thing. Not making assumptions. Basically, the 4 agreements. Don't take anything personally. Don't make assumptions. Do your best and be impeccable with your word. Don't say things you're not going to follow through on. And so, and I'll add manage your expectations with that. So whenever there's any kind of issues in a relationship situation, try to address them as soon as possible. And always, 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 and I got this from Wayne Dyer, if you're having a conversation that could potentially go off the rails or it's already gone off the rails, hold the person's hand when you're talking to them. It allows the other person to soften so much more and to really listen to what you're saying, and then seek to understand. If you seek to understand, it helps you not be so defensive.
Yeah.
So just put it in your mind. You're not going to defend yourself here. You're just gathering information so you can understand, because you know this person, you're on the same team. You know this person really cares about you. Otherwise, they would not be with you. They wouldn't even be having the conversation with you.
Right.
There are people who don't give a shit about you who are refusing to talk to you right now, right? So if someone is willing to at least dialogue with you, at least you know they care enough about you to do that.
Yeah.
And that's something. That's, you can pin whatever hopes you have on making this thing work on that, on the fact that we're having the conversation. And then from there, you know, you want to validate their experience. Before you say a word, you need to either repeat back what they said or show that you understand what they're feeling, with no sarcasm, with no passive aggression, right? Just
not like, so let me get this straight.
Yeah.
Is this what you're saying?
So this is what you say? I don't talk enough. Okay.
Do you get that?
Of course.
I just had this vision of you with I'm sure she's totally healthy. I'm not talking about whatever relationship. I'm just saying in my mind's eye, an incredibly healthy, but very spicy, like hot-blooded kind of Latin woman who just sort of knocks you a little off your axis. That sounds like it would be good for you.
I like a little bit of that.
Yeah.
That's kind of fun. But I'm going to give you one more minimalist thing for relationships. So I think this will be very helpful. Whenever you have a problem with somebody, it's not really that they're problematic or that the relationship is even problematic.
Right.
The real problem is that you've exceeded the expiration for that particular relationship dynamic. And here's what I mean. Milk has an expiration date. If you drink the milk before the expiration date, it tastes just like regular old milk. Mm-hmm. If you drink it a week after the expiration date, it's rancid and it could potentially cause you to vomit, right? Mm-hmm. Relationship dynamics also have an expiration time. So for instance, your mother can be a wonderful person for an hour. You spend 3 hours with her, all of a sudden she's a narcissist, she's toxic, she's this, she's that. No, you just spent too much time. You exceeded the expiration time. So you need to be able to assess the situation. What's the expiration time here, right? And the person that you may go to the drugstore with is not going to be the same person you may go on a road trip with.
Right.
Otherwise, when people come back and they're complaining about somebody, you've exceeded the expiration.
Yeah.
So you need to understand what it is, and you may find that that person is actually quite enjoyable for that period of time. And guess what? You have an expiration. There's some people who can't be around you for too long before they start to, feel a little bit out of sorts for whatever reason.
I think I have teenagers. I think but I agree with that, because I think it's also reading the room sometimes and knowing, even if you're going to be in a long relationship, so the expiration doesn't have to be in the years, but it could be within the moment.
It could be, I need an hour to myself once a day.
Listen, this space right here, Laird always jokes, there's 2 doors to this. And he goes, yeah, I mean, you go to your office, and he goes, behind 2 doors, right? But it's knowing even yourself, because the expiration actually also could be you.
100%.
And you're just like, oh, I am not good in this.
Yeah.
It's not you.
Yeah.
And I got to go. I think that's an important thing, and not making something out of nothing.
Right.
Really, there's nothing. Just move on. Just go.
And with work,
take a walk.
If you're working for more than an hour and you haven't taken a little break, maybe a little 10-minute walking break, you're exceeding the expiration. And now you're not focused. You're distracted easily. You're communicating badly because you're tired.
Yeah.
So you're sending emails that you probably wouldn't have sent otherwise, and messages that are triggering people. And you just need to honor that, honor what your needs are, so that you can continue to show up in the way that you ultimately want to be remembered for.
Yeah, that's true. So in writing Travel Light, what is it, or in your mind, sort of, what can we learn? What has shown up for you? Some of the most important lessons, kind of living this minimalist, or, just having this experiment for these last few years.
I learned that wherever you go, and this is not mine, wherever you go, there you are. Mm-hmm. So it's not about the environment. It's about how present you are to the environment. And again, going back to Robert Pirsig, he said, the only Zen you're going to find at the top of the mountain is the Zen you bring up there with you, which basically means The only happiness you're going to find in the relationship is the happiness you bring to the relationship. And you have to cultivate that. So, you know, we spend so much time and effort and energy trying to create wealth, but we have this mistaken idea that there's some connection between the wealth that we have and the fulfillment that we ultimately want to experience. And that's why we're so surprised when wealthy people don't seem all that fulfilled. It's because we have the expectation that those two things are connected. And it's correlation without causation. So the same amount of effort and attention and energy you put into accumulation of wealth, you also have to put into accumulation of fulfillment within. Yeah. And that requires dedicated practices, daily, you know, consistency, and all the things, just like you do with your wealth accumulation.
Yeah. You talk to all types of people. When you run into young, maybe teenagers or young adults, and they're looking to loud world, it's a combative world in certain ways. I mean, if we tuned in, I think, or tuned out, if we tune in, I think we can ground ourselves in our own feelings of stillness. Harder to do when you're forming and becoming a new person and, you know, new adult. What would you say to somebody who's like, I am curious, I don't know my purpose, you know, and it's hard, it's competitive, it's hard now. What kind of guidance? So let's say they are open to a meditation practice to create a foundation. Is there any other invitations that you would make to them about following that curiosity?
Yeah, I would say when it comes to following your curiosity, the world is going to say that you're wasting your time and that you should be focused on more serious things. And when that happens, I want you to just ignore all of that and keep doing the things that light you up inside. In addition to paying your bills and being responsible and, you know, taking care of your mother and all that stuff that you need to do. But if you can figure out ways to integrate all of that with your curiosity, that's what makes it unique to you. That's what makes your experience unique. And that's ultimately what's going to create the most fulfillment, is when you have curated your life in a way that no one else can duplicate your life and say that it also applies to them. And it can only ever apply to you. Like, for instance, with this book, no one could have written this book, Travel Light. Right. And I take great pride in the fact that I followed my curiosity to the degree that I was the only person in the history of the universe who could have written this book in this way with those stories. Yeah. You know, because they're all sort of unique to me and to my life experience. And I think that's possible for all of us. And if anything, it becomes an example for that. You know, what's your version of that? And are you following it?
Will you just know when it's time to put a deeper root down, and for now you're just gonna bop around?
Yeah, just know. Yeah,
the voice will come back and say,
yeah, the voice never left. Yeah, it's there every day. Yeah. You know, absolutely. So like the voice was like, you know, maybe you should wear pants to this interview today. So I was in my car, and then I pulled out the pants.
Really? Yeah. But it's me.
And the voice was like, well, no, it's Gabby. So you don't have to wear the pants.
Last time I think we were in bathing
suits. Or maybe
suits.
My ego was like, you should wear the pants. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the voice was like, no, just be yourself.
That's right. I'm just curious, because I have to ask, what exactly, at least right now, is in the bag, in the backpack?
Pretty much the same things that I wrote about in the book.
That's it? Same thing?
Same things. Meditation shawl, a couple pair of pants, one pair of pants. These are my one pair of shorts. I've got like 3 shirts, 3 t-shirts, mala beads, one pair of shoes. I just bought this little windbreaker from, it was very small. It folds up really, really easy. Because I didn't bring my sweater because it's August. So I left the sweater in a friend's closet, but I have one sweater, and you know, just like it's one of one. Everything is one.
I like that.
So I hand wash my clothes every day when I'm taking a shower. I just walk in the shower with all my clothes on, and
You do?
I hand wash my underwear. I don't wash my pants every day.
Yeah. That makes sense.
But if I'm at a friend's house and they have a washing machine,
You go-
I'd rather use that. Yeah.
A washing machine and a dishwasher are incredible inventions.
Yeah.
I'm not a fancy girl.
Yeah. But what's awesome is that you can turn that into a meditation as well. And if you don't happen to have a washing machine, it doesn't even register, you know. Whereas before, like, oh my God, I need to go find a washing machine.
Right,
I wonder,
I
need to go to the dry cleaner. I need to drop this off. You're not present.
No.
But the fact that I've done that now hundreds of times, it's like if there's not a washing machine, it doesn't matter at all. It's like just as well. Okay, fine. I'll just hand wash my clothes. In fact, I can get them cleaner hand washing them.
Probably. Well, I could ask you a million more questions.
I know. You asked the best questions.
This
is one of my favorite interviews
really?
so far. Yeah. And I've done a lot of interviews.
Oh, thank you. Can I tell you, I always hope I can show up.
Yeah, no, this is
every
beautiful.
time. I'm like, okay. Yeah. Neil and I did it a little differently when we were together.
Neil was asking most of the questions, I remember.
Yeah, Neil Strauss, you're a bully. No, I'm just kidding. No, Neil, you know, because I respect Neil and doing it together, I thought.
Well, he's a journalist too. It's like,
he's great. No, he's awesome. But I just also, from my point of reference, I'm so fascinated by some of the life things, how this incorporates into life. Because my hope is just because I decided to go this path and have a family, that I still can't within this borrow some of the things that you're saying.
And that's what's great about your questions, is that it comes from that real world lived experience as a householder, as a mother, as a wife, as, you know, just all the things.
Yeah.
And a lot of these podcasters are dudes, and dudes get the whole, we don't really need much. A lot of what we have is because you know, people in our lives like these things, but we don't really, so we understand. But it's nice to be able to sit with someone who's coming from a different life experience and just hear those kinds of questions.
Well, and I think actually the group that you said to me that needs it the most is the people that have the least amount of support. Like, just if you said, hey, I could steal a few minutes here and there and do this for myself, and what a tool that is free and I can do it anywhere.
Yeah.
So besides your books, is there a book that you really love or impacted you or inspired you?
Yes.
Yes.
The Alchemist. Because although they don't say it explicitly, he loses everything 2 or 3 times and has to kind of rebuild. And that's basically what I'm doing. I'm describing these moments of shedding everything and then just kind of being in the moment. And when you're in the moment, you will get the answers that you're looking for, to take things to an even bigger level than you ever imagined for yourself. And so I love that book. I read it all the time, or listen to it actually these days, because I don't have any physical books. Yeah,
they're too heavy.
There's no room. I've given myself the freedom of choicelessness. There's nowhere to put them. So I don't even have my own books.
And I did hear you say this, and I want to bring it up. All your pictures and stuff, you scanned.
I scanned,
so
and
people
I threw
like
it all away.
Just so they know, like, you know, it's there.
When you're forced to come up with creative solutions, guess what happens? You come up with creative solutions.
Yeah, you do.
And I love listening to stories from my brother and my dad about, you know, the people in prison are the most creative people on the planet, because they have to be.
Yeah.
And they were making all kinds of food and just doing all kinds of, they can do everything we can do on the outside, but with very few resources.
Right. Final question. If I missed something, if there was an important calling or invitation from you to someone listening to you right now, in any area, I just want to make sure I give you that chance.
I've said this before, but I think it's a good way to sort of put a bow on this conversation, is you don't ever have to stress yourself out looking for your path or your purpose. Just keep shamelessly following your curiosity, and eventually your purpose, what you're here to really do, it will find you.
From your point of view, I'm just curious, because you are observing the world from a more quiet place. We're in a weird transition right now. Do you feel hopeful about, you know, just relationships and where we're going and technology? Because you're more still. So I'm curious how it lands for you.
I'm hopeful that we're getting exactly what we need. Again, this is a school.
That's an answer.
This is a school of life. We're getting exactly what we need based on what the situation we've created for ourselves.
And what we've held important.
Yeah. And yeah, that's my answer.
Light Watkins, thank you for coming to my home, and thank you for your time, and thank you for your book.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm honored. I'm inspired, and I appreciate you so much.
Thank you. Justin, I didn't give it to you, but he answered the backpack question. Well, Justin usually gets one question. Did you have another one?
Was that your question?
Well, I was just going to ask how technology, is it friend, foe, or...
Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah.
Are you still on?
We're still rolling.
All right, Justin, you get your one question.
There you go.
Because,
Technology, has this helped you in your journey, or hindered you, or is it a necessary evil, or what do you think about all of it?
I like technology. I'm a big technology person. And a part of that is I love elegant design.
Mm-hmm.
So when technology is designed elegantly, which means it not only looks good, but it also functions in a way that truly makes life a little bit more navigatable, then I'm all about that. What I don't love is when things don't do what they're designed to do. That's like one of my pet peeves. So for instance, when you go to an airport or someplace and it has one of those motion detecting sinks and it doesn't work, and you're like, you look like an idiot doing all this stuff, and you come to find out it just doesn't work.
Doesn't work.
Really, really bothers me. But good thing I meditate.
It's true. Thank you for listening to this week's episode. If you want to learn more, there is a ton of valuable information on my website. All you have to do is go to GabrielleReece.com or head to the episode show notes to find a full breakdown with helpful links to studies, research, books, podcasts, and so much more. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out and send them to @GabbyReece on Instagram. And if you feel inspired, please subscribe. I'll see you next week. This podcast is brought to you by Laird Superfood. Many of you don't know, Laird Superfood was created in my kitchen in 2015 by my husband Laird, and we have a lot of beautiful products. We've got organic coffees, vegan creamers that taste amazing. But for my pumpkin spice lovers, I'm excited to share we have a whole new bunch of SKUs of pumpkin spice. We have pumpkin spice creamer, so our powdered creamers, ones that people are already using, like we've got original and turmeric and mocha and reduced sugar. Now we have pumpkin spice. We also have a pumpkin spice liquid that you can find in refrigerated sections of the grocery store. We have a pumpkin spice protein bar, 10 grams of protein, clean ingredients. And I like it because it's not gummy. It tastes like food. I mean, that's the hope. So it's not gummy, but it still has really clean ingredients. And finally, our pumpkin spice instant latte. This is an incredible product because all you have to do is add hot water. It's easy. You can take it on the go if you're traveling, if you want to have, your special drink with you at all times. It's so easy to use. Maybe you're going camping, maybe you're on an airplane, at the office. So if you're a pumpkin spice lover, check out all of our new fun pumpkin spice products. And you can go to lairdsuperfood.com. And if you punch in the code GABBY20 at checkout, you will receive 20% off.